The NATO Summit for 2026 just wrapped up, and today we're going to be talking about what happened, how that relates to both the Ukraine war and the Iran war, new updates on the Iran war because stuff got crazy, and finally how I was absolutely right about how the Republicans are going to be running in 2028 for the midterms. I told you so. I told you this would happen. Welcome to the Suit and Tie Conservative Show. Alrighty, well, we have an absolutely jam-packed show today for you guys. I didn't even get to fit in my extra, news story that I really wanted to talk about because there was so much happening. Because not only is the Iran war going crazy, we also have new stuff on the Ukraine and Russia war, even though it's 5 years old at this point. And of course, the NATO summit was even better. We're winning right now. We are absolutely winning, and it's beautiful. But first order of business, let's get on to the NATO summit. What happened? Well, the NATO summit concluded on Wednesday, the 8th of July. And Trump told the news, quote, "There was a lot of love in the room, a lot of unity," end quote. And quote, "We've had a tremendous time, and I think it is a great success," end quote. So, what kind of success are we talking about? What happened? I think it's easy to look at what Trump said and just go, oh, well, that's not really what happened. But General Secretary of NATO, Mark Rutte, I'm not really sure if you pronounce the E or not, said U.S. allies, quote, "warmly welcomed President Trump's leadership." And he also stated, quote, "The message of this summit is simple: NATO delivers," end quote. So what did this summit deliver? What actually happened in it? Well, there are a couple bullet points that we're going to be going through. First of all, the U.S. is possibly lifting a now 6-year ban for Turkey from the F-35 program, allowing them to potentially buy F-35s from the United States. This does not include the F-35's manufacturing. The manufacturing is and always has been in the United States, but now they could potentially buy them. This is according to Fox, and they were banned since 2019, so actually under Trump. Now, it's not confirmed yet, but it really does seem like it's going to happen based on what we're seeing from the administration. Secondly, NATO leaders have agreed to give a 70 billion euro, or in our dollars, $80 billion in support of Ukraine both this year and next year. So they're going to be giving a military kind of care package, if you will, worth 80 billion US dollars to Ukraine both this year and next year. So for 2026 and 2027, they're going to be giving that. Now, the United States is not joining this, but it is a good sign for Ukraine. They're getting a larger loan from NATO as a whole, but of course, again, not from the United States. Third, the U.S. is going to give a license to Ukraine to manufacture Patriot missile interceptors, which are critical for protecting important infrastructure and other targets in Ukraine. Fox News called the Patriot system, quote, "one of Ukraine's most sought-after air defense platforms," end quote. The reason why this is so important is Russia has been ramping up their missile usage on Ukraine and on especially key critical infrastructure targets. And the Patriot system, if you don't know, basically the way it works is you launch a missile that will intercept. It's the two missiles will hit each other, and then the one missile that the Patriot is targeting will basically explode midair. Israel has been using them for a long time, but this is the first time that we're actually giving them to another country, I think, besides Israel, or I definitely know this has not been used in Ukraine, despite the fact that the Ukraine has been asking for them for years. One important thing about this deal, however, is the U.S. is not actually directly giving money to Ukraine. We're just giving them the license and the ability to create Patriot missile interceptor systems in Ukraine. So Ukraine will actually be manufacturing themselves. We're not really footing the bill, but we're giving them the information and the support to create these, right? Which is a huge tone shift, which I'll get to in a moment after I'm done with all the other things that came out of the summit. Next, and this is the most important thing, NATO allies are increasing defense spending across the board. We're seeing a lot of increases, and also, though all NATO members committed that by 2035 they would be spending 5% of their GDP on defense, we're actually, most members right now, despite the fact that we're only 1 year into that agreement, we're already at 4% from most members. And I think this is really, as they were saying, as many members were saying, we're building a stronger Europe and a stronger NATO consequently. So this is great to see, because this is actually what really the America First crowd, the Republicans, and really most Americans have been asking for a long time, because for years, America has been footing the bill for NATO, and, it's the saying where, like, the most temporary solutions end up being the most permanent. This was supposed to be, at the very least from what I know, kind of like a temporary solution. You can't really sustainably be spending this much on literally foreign defense. We were spending a lot on defending Europe. Now, that's not necessarily bad, but it's not sustainable. You can't be doing that forever. So that's why it's so important, and that's why so many people wanted Europe to be pitching in. Europe to actually be contributing, so that way, yes, we do pay for it, because we are a large part of NATO. We are kind of a global hegemon, and we're a really big part of this treaty organization. But at the same time, Europe should be pitching it. And I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. And it's one that, for some weird reason, they were just unwilling to do recently, which is, I think, now just about the only good thing coming out of Europe. But it is really good to see. It's good to see them actually pitching in. Next, on the Iran war, it seems like Europe's involvement and NATO's involvement as a whole is kind of unclear in this. Obviously, America is not actually being invaded by Iran, so the NATO thing where, attacking one NATO member is attacking all of them isn't really applying yet. But the thing is, one of the things that Trump was kind of looking for is not just an increase in spending for NATO, but also potentially NATO involvement in Iran. What we are getting, however, is not much on that front. Not only is it unclear, though there were some semi-committee statements, and by that I mean, like, they were kind of committing, right? They were like, maybe we'll do it. But the one thing that we have gotten is, if the war ends, basically, there are some countries that are saying that they might commit to demining and de-escalating the war. However, if the war escalates, which we're going to see it is escalating, unfortunately, they're not committing any troops. And finally, the final news story of this is that shortly after having the NATO summit, shortly after leaving, that is, Trump launched retaliatory strikes on Iran. And we'll get to that in a moment. But first of all, I do want to just say that what Trump is doing here, I think a lot of people were a little bit confused on Trump's foreign policy. But Trump is actually, he's being very politically pragmatic here in this NATO summit. First of all, he's asking for things, and he's getting some of them. But secondly, he's asking for potential involvement in Iran, and he's maybe getting some of them. But also, the most important thing is we're getting commitment from Europe, which is very important. And then also, notice how he's supporting Ukraine. He's supporting Ukraine because he wants to stay true to his commitment that he made that he would end wars during his term. But of course, to do that, we at first tried, if you'll remember when he kind of came into office and he said this war is going to be over in a couple weeks, he tried to, first of all, doing it with diplomacy. Diplomacy didn't work, however. So now, how do we support Ukraine without necessarily going back on our word and basically saying, no, we're going to go back to giving them billions and billions and billions. And, of course, Europe is more doing that now, but the US was doing that under Biden for a while, and Trump doesn't want to do that. So how do you support them? You give them the information and the ability to make kind of American goods, but not actually the money, right? So this is kind of the pragmatic balance we find that Trump is committing to, because he wants to support them, but also he doesn't want to go against any promises. He wants to both end wars, that he promised that, but also not get too involved in foreign wars. And this is the in-between that we're finding. So yeah, that's kind of what happened on the NATO summit. But next, there were some things that related to the Iran war. As I was saying, we were launching retaliatory strikes. But I do want to say, before I get to that, I just want to pump the brakes a little bit and just say, if you're enjoying the show, please consider possibly subscribing, and if you want to talk to me about absolutely anything, throw it down in the comments. I promise that I will engage with you with whatever you want to talk about in relation to the show. Anyways, back to the show. So Iran... There's new updates on Iran. Very clearly, we're launching retaliatory strikes. If you're following the show, last you heard is basically where you have peace agreements that are kind of falling apart, but now we have actual, war again. So here's the recap since the last show. Iran has attacked 3 commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz, sparking a response early Wednesday from the U.S., and we went and bombed Iran and also revoked their right to sell crude oil in the world market. You'll remember that the U.S. had given that as kind of part of the negotiations for peace, but now, since peace is kind of breaking down, we're revoking that, which we never should have done in the first place. We never should have given them that in the first place, but it's good to see that rolled back. Okay, so that's good. And U.S. CENTCOM said that American forces launched these strikes, quote, to impose heavy costs for targeting and attacking commercial shipping crewed by innocent civilians in the strait, end quote. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. That's the update. Now, Iranian officials have privately said that these attacks on the ships were basically mistakes. It was a little oopsie, we attacked those ships, and they didn't mean to. However, their new leader is vowing that there will be revenge. Quote, "This must definitely be done," referring to the revenge. Israel even has uncovered an Iranian assassination plot on Trump. So we are seeing massive escalations here. Not only are we bombing them, they're also completely breaking agreements. They're attacking ships in the strait, and also they're potentially trying to assassinate Trump. Okay, and of course, chanting death to America in the streets and vowing revenge. The U.S. response is this. Trump on Truth Social said that on Friday night, 1,000 missiles are aimed at Iran, and also he makes several demands for Iran. The demands are this. Publicly, not just privately, state that the strait is open. Secondly, commit to stopping attacks on commercial vessels. And third, recognize the shipping lanes will remain open without tolls. Now, right here, we can see that the U.S. is offering peace. We're kind of saying, hey, let's go back to what we had before under the MOU. Let's go back to the strait being open. We can, we took away your nice little oil, but we could give it back maybe, right? Basically saying, we still want peace. We can have it maybe. But here's the thing. Iran is literally vowing that they want war. Therefore, really, they have forced our hand. We don't really have a choice at this point. And so what I would say is, if they don't accept the peace that we're offering, which I really doubt that they will, I would say they have left us with no choice. We have to strike them, and we have to strike them significantly harder. We have to strike them as hard as possible, really. And this reminds me of Machiavelli in The Prince. He writes that if you strike someone, you should strike them so hard to not even fear retaliation from them, right? You have to cripple them. And that's what I would say. We offered them peace and war. They are choosing war. And so we need to decisively win, because here's the thing. Here's the other thing about this war. There are a lot of concerns that we are currently, as the Republican Party, basically handing the midterms over to the Democrats because of this war. But here's the thing. We don't want to pull out of this war and have it be an embarrassment. We want to have it be a win. And so not only, as I was saying in my first show, do we have to have this war be just? The other thing is, the way we have to pull out is it has to be in some way a victory. And this kind of peace where we pull out and they're still chanting death to America and they're still making threats, they're trying to assassinate our president, that's not the peace we actually want. The peace we want is pulling out and having either basically peace with good deal, like a good deal, or we want them to basically surrender. And I would say at this point, if they're forcing our hand, if we have to go in and we have to do military strikes, let's stop holding back. Let's strike them so hard that we don't even fear a retaliation, because even if we lose the midterms, I want to be able to walk into the presidential elections with some wins from this term, please. Okay, and even if we lose the midterms, it would be a win to have this in Iran. It would be good. The final story of the show, I was right. You know I hate to say I told you so, but I did tell you this would happen. Recently, Senator Eric Schmidt said that hammer and sickle politics are going to dominate 2028 the 2028 elections Democrat strategy. So basically, the Democrats are going to, he's really, what he's saying in plain English is the Democrats are going to be communists in the 2028 elections. Now, I do want to make it clear that this is political messaging. However, this is good political messaging, because I saw that there were some comments on my show basically kind of, on my last show that is, basically saying that, I don't know, communism isn't real, these Democrats aren't really communists. I think I proved that there are really some communists in here. But the other thing I want to say is, like, from a more basic, like, logical perspective, we can see that there are some communists, because good political messaging, it doesn't make things up, okay? It magnifies problems. It is not that there are no Democrat communists or no Democrat extremists or whatever. It's not that there are no extreme leftists. It's that we are magnifying them in our political messaging here. And I told you this. I said this would happen in my last show. I said in my last show that the Republicans' message for the 2028 elections will revolve around wins in Iran and the fact that basically Democrats are communists. And what we are going to see is that we already have a senator just a week later basically saying that in 2028 the Democrats are going to be communists. And he's not making that up. He's really not. There are actually communists. It's just that we're magnifying them in our messaging. The other thing that he said is, quote, the money and the energy on the Democrat side right now are on these radical leftist communists. Why, though? Right? That's kind of the question you have. Okay, why is that the money and the energy on the Democrat side is all going towards these, like, kind of crazy extremists? Like, right, we can admit, if you are a communist and if you're that far, you're a little nutty, okay? So why is it all going towards this? And I would say, really what it is that hatred is driving this political polarization of both parties, but especially we're seeing a lot of hatred of Donald Trump, and we're seeing that hatred drive the left and drive the Democrat Party towards towards increasingly extreme politics. With both parties, there's an extreme, right? On the left, the extreme is basically kind of we can look at, so the term of the left comes from the French Revolution, the people who basically chopped everyone's heads off and overthrew the whole government. They sat on the left, and they are oftentimes opposed to the establishment, oftentimes violent, and also, of course, the statement that we're seeing right now from the Republicans is they're oftentimes communist. And of course, communism doesn't align very well. And of course, on the right, we also have that. We have the stigmatism of Nazism and generally despotism, or the common word is tyranny, and basically just increasingly authoritarian governments is what you're kind of seeing. And that's kind of the framing of what extreme looks like on the right and what extreme looks like on the left. But in this case, there's so much hatred towards Trump that what we're seeing really is, of course, there's polarization on both sides, but I'm seeing a very extreme polarization on the left. We're seeing them go really, really far. People are being driven to politically support communism and also increasingly violence, political violence. Of course, though I didn't have time in this show to talk about it, the Charlie Kirk trial is happening right now. He was murdered by a leftist. You can see this from a lot of studies, like from The Hill, and I believe there was even a New York Post one. Anyways, I'm not going to belabor the point too much. The leftists are increasingly able to support political violence and even willing to potentially be involved in political violence. And it's very concerning to see. But here's what I would say to the liberals that are watching this, because there may be some. I would just like to say, please do not allow your hatred of Trump or your hatred of Republicans or whatever it is to make you or force you to agree with increasingly extreme politics, just unreasonable politics, whether that is political violence, whether it's communism, whether it's just completely inflammatory rhetoric that's just so far left, right? You don't have to agree with that, right? You don't have to go that far. And then to the conservatives in the audience, because I am student conservative, it's probably most of my audience, I would say, assume that won't happen. Assume that the leftists, because many of them, with politics in general, many people are not reasonable, some people are reasonable. The reasonable ones might hold back, but the unreasonable ones certainly won't. And so I would say, just like I did in my last show, stay unified here. Whether you have problems with Trump, whether you have problems with his stance on, I don't know, NATO, maybe you hated NATO, maybe you hate the Iran war, maybe you hate this and that he's doing, stay unified here, because I want you to really focus on the fact that communism is real, it is coming, though it is being magnified, I'll admit, in the political messaging. It is real, it's coming, and even more pressing and even more proven is the fact that the left is becoming increasingly politically violent. And so I would say we can't just, I hear some people on the right saying, oh, we should, I don't really like this and that Trump is doing. We should just hand everything over to the Democrats and teach him a lesson, teach the Republicans a lesson that they need to do this and that. But I would say, ultimately, we need to be a little bit more principled than that. We need to restrain ourselves a little bit and stay unified, because unification is one of the things that the Republicans sometimes really struggle on. But it's this thing that ultimately will win us elections and will give us other political wins too. So that's the show. That's what I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. As I said earlier in the show, please consider liking the video if you enjoyed it, and also subscribing to the channel if you want to see more content. And as I said as well, if you have anything you want to talk to me about, engage with me in a kind of like debate and a conversation in good faith, then throw them down in the comments and I will commit to responding to absolutely all of them, absolutely all of the comments about the show. So thank you so much. Catch you in the next one.